There are no aliens. All right, welcome back, everybody. Welcome back. Let's talk about aliens. It's very interesting how the whole alien or UAP sort of narrative always rears its head right as the government is facing a lot of heat. Either in this particular case, let's look at what's been going on for the last year or so. You have the Epstein files debacle. We have multiple wars that the US has been engaged in. You have a lot of pushback regarding some legislation that's being pushed through that most would consider is infringing on people's privacy. And so if you look throughout history, you'll see a pattern of whenever these types of things are going on, all of a sudden the government wants to reveal information about something or another, like the JFK files, or in this case, the Epstein files, or in the past, the 9/11 files. And so it's just very convenient. And it goes back way before that stuff. That anytime the government's facing heat or corruption is being exposed, all of a sudden they drop some sort of a narrative to distract the public. And in this case, what we've seen a lot of lately is the whole, UAP / aliens thing. So right out of the gate, I'm going to recommend a book because it ties in with what I'm going to say right here. So the book is called Legacy of Ashes, and this is the book right here. And it's a pretty mainstream book. As you can see, it's a National Book Award winner. And it's basically a really comprehensive history of the CIA. Now, there are other books that delve into the more seedy side of things that the CIA has done. But even in this book, they talk about how when certain activities were taking place around the world that the CIA was involved in, like, for example, overthrowing a government, among many other things, they would plant stories about UFOs or aliens in the media in those areas to distract the public from what was really going on. So I recommend this book. I'm going to continue to recommend books to people that I think are worthy reads and touch on the things that I like to talk about. So that's one. I would say there are others that might be considered quote unquote conspiracy theory books. But if you connect the dots between a lot of declassified operations that have taken place, and you kind of cross reference that with some of the more mainstream things, and then connect that to some of the more conspiratorial things, you'll see there's a lot of crossover there. Some of the things that are or used to be considered maybe conspiracy theory have come to light later on as being factually true. And I think we've seen a lot of that in the recent past. I mean, just think of things like MK Ultra. I remember I mentioned this in my first episode, hearing about that years ago, like probably well over a decade ago, and I wasn't familiar with it. And then as you start to dig a little bit, and you maybe go on a message board or something and search that, you'll find specific information. And then you start to see, well, actually, this was all declassified. And we've recently seen people talking about MK Ultra, which is essentially a CIA mind control program. And it was wide reaching. It wasn't just one thing. They were involved in a bunch of different things. LSD experiments were one aspect of it. There were others, but for example, the book Chaos that touches on Charles Manson and the CIA, and how the CIA was trying to infiltrate the anti-war movement in America, the quote unquote hippie movement. I just started watching a documentary on Netflix about Seymour Hersh, the famous journalist. And I know he worked for the New York Times, and he was one of the people that exposed the MK Ultra thing because he got inside information that revealed a lot of things about it to him. So you can look into that. He touches on that in that documentary. I would recommend that as well. Anyway, that's just something that I think would be a worthy read. It's a pretty detailed book. It's pretty dense. It gets into all the different CIA directors and the different high-ranking officers and things like that. But it's good because you can use it as a reference book, and you just have to connect the dots, right? Because if they were doing things in the past that got revealed, it doesn't mean they're not still doing it, just under a different label or maybe more updated with the technology that we have today. So that's one aspect I wanted to touch on today. The other aspect that I really wanted to touch on today is I'm going to talk about the deep state. Right? We've all heard the term the deep state forever and ever. And I would like to talk about what we were told it was versus what it really is in relation to a lot of the conspiracy theories you've heard. Now, in the past, the deep state was considered a conspiracy theory. Oh, there's this powerful network of people that control things. That's a crazy conspiracy theory. Then over time, as it started to gain traction and more people started to learn about a lot of the things that were going on and a lot of the aspects of how the so-called shadow government type of a system works, and it became revealed through declassified things and through people speaking out, whistleblowers over time. Then it was, oh well, it all it really is it's a bunch of unelected officials that have powerful positions around peripherally around the government, and donors and lobbyists and things like that. That was the narrative that was pushed. Now, my opinion of what the deep state actually is more of a wide reaching network of powerful interests that have large, I mean, I don't want to say investments in our government, but large contracts with the government. They have lobbying power. They're people at the highest levels of different industries, oligarchs, and I would say the intelligence networks play a role in that. And one of the big things that I believe dictates a lot of what the quote unquote deep state does is the global banking cartel, as I call it. The power structure that really has been in power and control for literally centuries. Now, you could also tie in secret societies with that, because if you look into that powerful banking cartel and you look at the key players, I'm willing to bet that you can find connections between them and secret societies. I'll just use one of the obvious ones that most people are familiar with, which is Skull and Bones, right? So, Skull and Bones is a secret fraternity at Yale. There are others, by the way. There are other secret societies at Yale and other Ivy League and private universities, but that's a pretty famous one. Movies have been made about it and so on. If you look into like some of these large private equity and global banking industry moguls, they have connections to that stuff. And so One of the things I have come to know over the last several years, it basically it all started, the questioning started with this. I started to hear about all these politicians. We all did. Like all of a sudden, this person's being pushed, and you've never heard their name before. They kind of come out of nowhere, and all of a sudden they're being pushed as the next rising star in politics. And we all know the names. We can all pick different people that fall into this category. And I just always wondered who is this person? Why are they being pushed like they've been around forever and everybody knows who they are? And that started me questioning. And then over time, I saw it more and more because once you become aware of something, you start to see it everywhere. And then I started to sort of dig in a little bit more. And who is this person? You know, where do they come from? What's their background? And I'm putting this on you guys to look into this stuff on your own. I'm not going to tell people what to look for. You have to, be willing to be curious and dig in. But you'll find a lot of these people come from either private equity or some global banking type of business. A lot of times you'll see the same type of thing with journalists or people that run organizations that are supposed to be journalistic. If you look at their background, you'll start to see they have a lot of intelligence related jobs in their past. And if not directly working for intelligence, working for organizations that had connections to intelligence. So those are things I started to notice. And once you recognize that pattern, you start to see it more and more. And then when you see something, like, for example, a journalist that becomes really popular and starts to get a lot of credibility, I would recommend looking into that person's background, see where they started out, and ask yourself, well, how did they go from that to what they're doing now? Sorry, my half of my body is disappearing here. I don't know. I think it's because it's kind of bright outside and the light is kind of obscuring. Can you see my hand? There, I have another arm and another side of my body. Anyway, so I would say to look into that type of stuff because to me, that stuff, that's all the deep state, the way that I look at it. These very powerful networks that have common interests. And you'll see another thing that's really important to pay attention to is over time, when powerful institutions or powerful entities share a common interest with another organization, whether it be a secret society or the intelligence community, they will often partner with them. You'll see that throughout history. Like, for an example that I gave to somebody recently was, if you look back to Freemasonry, going back centuries, the crown in England started to see that Freemasonry was building a lot of power among the people. It was starting to get more influence. So what did they do? They co-opted it. They started partnering with the Freemasons, right? And that is a pattern you'll see throughout history. I'll give another great example, and a nod to Whitney Webb, because in her books she has a two-volume series, One Nation Under Blackmail. I mentioned it in my first episode. She traces the marriage between the intelligence agencies and organized crime, right? And that happened during World War II, essentially right after World War II. They started to, it probably happened during World War II when it was the Office of Strategic Services, and then it transitioned in 1947 to the CIA. But they wanted, who controlled the ports, right? It was the mob basically controlled the ports. So they started partnering with organized crime in New York Harbor to monitor what was going on in the harbor, because there had been, German U-boats and things that were spotted, and there was spying that was going on. So that is some of the origins of it. But if you look back to other examples in history, the book Dark Alliance, which talks about how the CIA was involved with drug running and gun running to support the Contra movement in Nicaragua. And that book, Dark Alliance, was what inspired the movie American Made with Tom Cruise, where he plays the pilot, Barry Seal, who was actually the guy who was running Southern Air Transport, which was a CIA front company. And they were basically running drugs and guns and money to different factions of the Contra movement in Nicaragua, which was in opposition to the Sandinistas. So, anyway, that's just another example where power factions use other types of organizations to work together if they have common interests, right? So, there are many, many examples, but I'm just trying to paint a picture that the reason that I believe that the deep state, or quote unquote shadow government, is not exactly what we've been told is because if you pay attention, you start to see the way it all shakes out. You start to see how it appears to work versus what you're being told is really going on, right? And I tend to trust my own judgment rather than what narratives I'm being told to believe. In this, particularly in this type of situation, right? When you're dealing with powerful entities and powerful interests. So I would even argue that the deep state is a global type of a thing. And it's not like an organization like the Illuminati or Freemasons. It's a network. It's just like like a dark web network of common interests that are used to forward agendas. And so my overarching view of the deep state is really more aligned with a global sort of framework. Um, it was often used in the United States, but that term didn't originate in the United States. I can't remember off the top of my head where where that originated, but I'll have to look that up again because not too long ago I was researching it and I saw that it came from another country. I can't recall if it was Germany or no, it wasn't Germany, but I'll mention it in a future episode. So if you think about it, oftentimes things that we are told are convenient in when we are told them. So to tie it back to the whole alien thing. Now, I say there are no aliens. The reason I say that is not because I don't think there could be life in other galaxies. It's not because I dismiss the possibility that there are other dimensions, right? It's very possible if you are like a genius when it comes to quantum physics and all these different multiverse theories and whatnot, you would understand those theories better than I do. I have a extremely cursory knowledge of that stuff, but I don't believe that it is in the way they suggest that it is. I think that one of the reasons I believe this is because over time, it's all you ever notice, like all these things that have happened when they're bringing up the possibility of the existence of other beings from other galaxies, intelligent life from other planets, whatever, however you want to say it. It's always tied to things they can't verify. Oh, and it's top secret, it's classified, we can't tell you, right? I just don't buy that type of thinking. And I tend to always think that the reason that is done is, and this is tying in with the main point of this stream, deep state control mechanisms. They use these things to hold over the public and to put out information when it's convenient for them as a control mechanism. Now, think about the Cold War, right? The Cold War, Russia's got nukes. They want to keep the population scared so they can control aspects of the public and what citizens think and how they behave and what they'll accept. So, Tim, I highly recommend this. I didn't want to play his clip on the stream, but recently, within the last week, Tim Dillon, whom I always give shout outs to, did a brilliant, hilarious thing on aliens. And you have to go watch it. I highly recommend it. It's brilliant. But it's just like this whole alien thing. Like most of you that are into conspiracies have heard of Project Bluebeam, which is like a fake alien invasion to be used to control the public. Tim Dillon talks about it in a hilarious way. But think about this stuff. So many things that we have seen always end up having the benefit of control over the population. Keep people scared, keep people divided. I talked about that in my first episode. Keep people fighting against each other. And I think that this is a system that I believe has been in place for literally centuries. And the power structure, and in the future, I don't want to go too much into this right now, but in the future, I will get into what I believe governments really are. I touched on it a little bit in the last episode, but I'll dig more deeply into more specific things. My first few episodes are going to be more of like overview stuff about what I think and why I think the way that I do about bigger picture things. And then as we go forward, I'm going to do more specific topics. And I will have guests in the future as well when we talk about certain specific topics. So if you just look at how every time things are going against public interest, like larger agendas, this is when you'll see the distractions ramp up, right? And war is a big one. Right when information starts coming out, we get involved in military actions, right? There are many examples. We all know in the recent years, Ukraine, we got the Gaza situation, we've got, the Iran situation, and now the fear mongering about this virus thing that they're trying to scare people about, the hantavirus, right? It's all about keeping people scared because a large chunk of the population will fall for that, right? A large chunk of the population still thinks the news is real. They still think they're being told the truth by the government and the media. And if you look at it and do any research whatsoever, that's not true, right? So I think that part of what I like to do is, and you're going to get sick of hearing me say this. I tend to look at whatever information is being presented to the public. I say who benefits, right? And I look at what are they trying to get us to believe and why. Why would they want the public to believe this? It's usually really easy to figure out what they're trying to do. And if you have decent pattern recognition, you can usually figure it out pretty quick. And once you develop that, then you know what they're really trying to get the public to do. Like, for example, after 9/11, it was we need to ramp up domestic surveillance with the Patriot Act. We have to, can't allow another horrific event like this happen. So it gets people willing to give up certain rights and privacies, right? And we know about what Edward Snowden revealed about what the government was doing, domestic spying, e- extreme domestic surveillance. So if you just pay attention to these things, because in the future, I believe, based on what I know, that the push for more control, more surveillance, more removal of people's civil liberties is going to dramatically ramp up. It already has in the last several years, a lot. Now, the media conveniently reports on certain things, right? You have to pay attention and also watch other content creators outside of the mainstream to give yourself a more well-rounded view of things. And like I said in my last episode, some of the stuff that sounds absolutely crazy, like this is a crazy conspiracy theory, I can't believe people believe this. A lot of that stuff ends up being true, right? I'm not talking about conspiracy theories for the sake of conspiracy theories. Some people just like conspiracy theories, right? They're exciting to think about and interesting and what have you. I don't get into conspiracies for that reason. I tend to look at stuff that has relevance to what's going on in the world. And you can look at the past, you can see what quote unquote conspiracy theories have been proven to be true, and what things now that we're hearing about will end up being true. Now, the Epstein files is a really good example of this. A lot of times, I think most people don't want to accept the level of evil that exists in the world, the level of greed, the fact that there are sociopaths in powerful positions. And I'm pretty sure I mentioned this. I definitely mentioned it on the Devil's Advocate stream. But I took a class in college. It was taught by a retired FBI special agent. And one day we were talking about, I can't remember specifically, but the topic of CEOs and powerful politicians and people in powerful positions. And he said that it was sort of a well founded and well received or regarded theory that a lot of these powerful people, including high level politicians and CEOs and what have you, were sociopaths. And it makes perfect sense because, by definition, sociopaths or psychopaths don't feel remorse. They don't feel empathy the way normal people do. And so, who would you want in a position where extreme wealth and financial interests are involved? You would want somebody that is able to do things that are going to harm a lot of people. But if they help powerful people like high level shareholders of a corporation or powerful interests, right? You need to have somebody that's okay with doing bad stuff. War. I mean, you think about war. Military leaders, when any military action takes place, there's going to be collateral damage. There's going to be civilians that get killed. You have to be a certain type of person to be able to do that. Now, I'm not saying all these people are sociopaths, but I think it's a logical assumption that there is a percentage of them that are. And if you get a group of these people working together for certain agendas, a lot of harm can be done to the population. And there are many people that I will talk about in the near future that fall into this category. People that were CEOs or the founders of big companies that get involved in other things like public health, and they get involved in other type of advocacy, philanthropy, quote unquote philanthropy. And you have to ask yourself, are these people really looking out for the best interests of citizens, or are they serving their own interests, right? I would argue that they're not looking out for the best interests of the larger group of people, and they don't care about the greater good. They just frame it that way. And that's how they manufacture consent, because a lot of people believe it and don't do research. And I don't say these things to be mean towards people. There's just different types of people. Some people just, they watch the news and they don't really question it too much. And so they accept that as their reality, right? You watch people, have you ever seen people that watch those finance shows in the morning, on whatever news station it is? They have these, investing shows and things like that. That's steering people. That's a way to manipulate the markets. Is you push information that's going to steer the public towards things and away from other things. I mean, this is a majorly large scope that I'm talking about. And I think I would probably be more interesting to a lot of people if I just flooded my streams with minutia about different things. I tend to believe the way to make changes is to talk about the big picture, get people to lock into that. And then you start to figure out, all right, how do we change it? What good is it if I were to talk about things and never offer any solutions, right? It's like, okay, great, this is going on, but what do we do about it? And like, I'm going to keep hammering in as many episodes as I can. Being aware of it is one of the first steps, right? To get people to start waking up. And then you can start figuring out, once you have a paradigm shift and you start to look at the world in a certain way and maybe see things that you didn't see before about the reality that we are living in, then when certain things are being pushed and certain narratives are being pushed and agendas are being pushed, people might start to question things and not just go along with it like, well, I guess this is what we're doing. We're going with this. The World Economic Forum says you'll own nothing and be happy. I guess that's what we're doing eventually, you know. And a lot of these organizations, these think tanks, these advocacy type of NGOs, they're there to manufacture consent from the public because they know a chunk of the public will buy into it and support it, right? Without really looking into what the negative impacts are. And people just, they don't question things enough. And it's frustrating because I mean, it's really difficult sometimes. I've had discussions with people, and they, it's kind of crazy. Some of you guys know I play music on the side. I'm just a weekend warrior musician, right? But I've played in bars for years. And, in between sets, I would be grabbing a drink at the bar or whatever, and I'd hear people talking about stuff that's going on in the world or stuff that's on the news or whatever news source they listen to, whatever platforms they listen to. And I can't believe the things that people believe. They just don't know that it's propaganda. They don't know where it's leading them, the purpose of it. And it's hard. I'm sure a lot of you out there feel the same way. When you see things coming a mile away and people around you seem oblivious to it, it's really frustrating. And that is the whole reason why I decided I wanted to do this, is because I don't want to just attack this side or that side or talk about details of the stuff that's on the news, right? Because in my opinion, that shit is toxic. And I consume a lot of information. I just don't get it from the mainstream media. So what I would say and what I would hope that most people will do is start to use critical thinking more and try to suss out what these narratives are really for. I would argue, honestly, as crazy as it sounds, everything we're hearing from the mainstream media, by and large, is just fiction. It's just made up narratives that are designed to steer the public and to steer policies, right? Because if you can get the public on board and convince them of certain things, and when legislation starts to get pushed, you can convince them that this is a good thing. Oh, if you're on this side, this is good for your quote unquote side. If you're on the other side, you know, it's bad, or it's good for one side but not the other. And that taps into people's tribalism. Anyway, I digress. I went on a tangent there. I do that a lot. You'll see. All right, so as I start getting closer to wrapping up, um, I want people to start, if you have the time and you're interested, start reading some books, both mainstream ones and maybe dig a little deeper and find some ones that aren't as mainstream, and start to try and find a topic that you're interested in that may be relevant and important to the big picture, and start with that, because a lot of times that will lead you to other things. And then you might read like, for example, I started reading a really old book on Freemasonry because I only knew the bare basics about it up until like the past year or so. And it takes you into other areas. It makes you start learning about other things you might have heard of. You just didn't really dig into it. So what I would say is, dig into a lot of different things that will keep your interest. And I like psychology. So there's a book that I started reading that I have. I want to finish it. I didn't get to finish it because I got sidetracked with other things. But it's not a long book or anything. It's relatively short, and I probably only read about 50 pages of it. But I want to go back and finish it. It's called The Psychology of Totalitarianism by Matthias Desmet, or it's Matthias Desmet. Not sure how it's pronounced, but that's one I'm gonna finish soon, because that ties in with a lot of what happened and what started in spring of 2020. He talks about mass formation psychosis, and he's a renowned psychologist from the Netherlands. So he's not some random dude writing about conspiracy theories. So After I read that, I'll let you guys know if I think it's a worthy read. But anyway, look, I want to start wrapping up. I will say, as I'm going to say all the time, this stuff is just my opinion based on what I know, information that I've seen. And anything that might point to a certain person or organization or entity is just alleged. But I would recommend that more people start digging into things. And please like and subscribe, comment, because I do read the comments, and sometimes people say, "Hey, do you know about this?" And it might be something I've heard about, but I don't know that much about. And at the very least, it kind of puts it in my ear and makes me more aware of it. So when I have an opportunity, I can look into things and tell me some things you would like to discuss. Like I said, this first few episodes are going to be more general, more sort of big picture. And then I will start to zero in more on specific things, specific organizations, specific things that are happening. And I'll do commentary on certain things that are going on at the time being. So I hope that people will subscribe. I hope they will share my videos, because I do want to be able to build a little bit of a following, and I want to spread the message, because what I think people need to start to do is realize it's not this side versus that side, this group versus that group, and so on and so forth. It's citizens, regular people versus the power elites, the power structure. It has always been that, but they've managed to convince people that it's this side versus that side. It's this race versus that race, this group versus that group. And I think that is all by design. So if people start waking up, I think it's the only way that we can start to build awareness that this is what's really going on. And the only way to stop it is more people uniting. That doesn't mean agreeing with everything. It doesn't mean you're going to all of a sudden be all totally accepting of one ideology or one group or whatever. But I'm telling you, I've played this out in my head a million times. This is what we have to do as a society. We have to. We're not overthrowing the government. That's not happening. That's a crazy idea. That's not going to happen. But if we build a critical mass of enough people that are awakened, they're not going to buy the bullshit. They're going to completely, it's a weird thing. I talked about it a little bit in my first episode. There's a spiritual component to it. And I believe in like a collective unconscious. So I think if that type of thinking starts to spread, I believe it will not allow the power structure to get away with as much as it has been able to get away with. So with that, I say, thank you everybody for tuning in. I'm sorry half my body is cut off. And I'm hoping to start having 2 or 3 videos per week. Right now, I'm in the beginning, it might be just one a week, but I'm going to start doing more, maybe smaller clips and releasing those, or do like a little snippet of a topic about something for people to check out or look into in between the longer videos. So thanks again, everybody. And I hope to see you guys soon. Take care, and we'll see you on the next one.
Throughout history, certain events have shaped our world in ways that go far beyond their immediate impact. November 22nd, 1963. September 11th, 2001. March 2020. Each moment marked not just by tragedy, but by the questions that followed. The Warren Commission, the 9/11 Commission, emergency powers that became permanent. From Dallas to New York to global lockdowns, patterns emerge for those willing to look. The same institutions, the same responses, the same consolidation of power. Recent events continue this trajectory. Butler, Pennsylvania, Manhattan's streets. Each incident followed by familiar narratives, familiar solutions. Meanwhile, in boardrooms from Davos to Bilderberg, the world's most powerful gather behind closed doors. Central banks coordinate policy. Intelligence agencies share resources. Global forums set agendas that nations follow. The World Economic Forum speaks of stakeholder capitalism. The Bilderberg Group meets in secrecy. Ancient orders maintain their influence. Some call it conspiracy, others call it coordination. But the connections are there, documented and undeniable. The question isn't whether these networks exist, it's whether we're brave enough to acknowledge their influence on the world we inhabit. The dots are there. We just have to be willing to connect them.